Our good friend Steve Gardner from USA Today, kind enough to join us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Always good to talk to you. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, my friend.
I did, Rich. How about you?
It was very good. Thank you very much. Always filled with work, but you know what? It comes with the territory when you're in this type of business. All right, let's get to the latest. Let's get to the Phillies in a moment. There's a couple reports floating out there with the Mets and Diaz and Robinson Cano, and there's been, quote, significant momentum. There's no momentum. There's a little bit of momentum. I mean, is this legit now that the Mets are going to make a play for Cano and Edwin Diaz?
It seems like it, and I've seen a lot of Mets fans on Twitter and social media, not so hot about the deal. Others, saying I would rather go somewhere else. The point is, at least the Mets are active, and I think that's the important thing here. They're looking into the big picture as opposed to what the Mets have traditionally done and tried to kind of nickel and dime. It seemed like the off season. So it does look that way. Cano and Diaz would certainly make the Mets stronger in the short term. And it all depends on, I think if how much the Mariners are willing to pick up on Cano's contract, or if the Mets are able to include somebody like a Jason Vargas or somebody, or a Jay Bruce that has a pretty large contract on their side to get it done. And at this point, I think there does look like there's seriousness on both sides.
And I think that's one you bring up a great point, because Cano's halfway through that 10-year contract, right? 10-year, $240 million contract he signed with the Mariners. So he's got 5 years and 120 remaining. He had the issue where he's busted for PEDs this past season, which I think, to me, makes suitors a little more hesitant. If he's suspended again, it's going to be for 162 games. So you got to take that in consideration. But the reason I start with the Mets and potentially this move and how it correlates to the Phillies is that you've got two West Coast teams with high payrolls, right? They stumbled down the stretch last season. So what are they now going to do? They're going to shed salary and rebuild. The Mariners won 89 games. They realize, hey, you know what? We're too far behind the Astros, maybe even the A's. We can't go this route. They trade Paxton, right? Now they're looking to maybe ship Diaz out, Cano. So my point is, the Phillies have the money, but sometimes, listen, spending big doesn't always work.
Yeah, and I think, too, before the Phillies start talking, if they're going to talk trade with people, I think because they have the money, the best place to put that to work is in the free agent market, and you don't have to give up any prospects. At least, for the Mets, if they're going to make that deal with the Mariners, Seattle's going to want one or two of the Mets' best prospects back, and for the Phillies, maybe there aren't guys that they are willing to deal out of the farm system. So take that financial advantage you have, the money, the cash on hand to spend, and go ahead and look at a Patrick Corbin or somebody like that on the pitching side, or the Manny Machado, Bryce Harper, whoever else on the hitting side. I think that's the first place to look if you're Philadelphia, and maybe if some of those things fall through and you don't get who you want, or you only get one of the guys that you want, then you start looking at the trade possibilities.
Yeah, the timing for everything's interesting, right? Because I think the Phillies are a team, they have deep pockets. You listen to what John Middleton says. He's got that desire to spend. They're about to spend. You probably have two or three other teams that realize they can spend just as much. And I'm wondering, if you're the Phillies, we know Corbin was in town. They're going to, he's hearing the Phillies pitch. They need another arm. They need another bat. I mean, at the end of the day, give me two or three players where if you can put those on the Phillies wish list, not name Harper or Machado, that you would like to see them pursue.
Wow. Okay. Well, I definitely think a starting pitcher, and whether that's somebody like maybe a Charlie Morton, somebody like that. If you put a lot of resources into a Harper or a Machado, then what about maybe getting one of those, not top of the level, top of the market starting pitchers, but somebody like a Charlie Morton that can give you that kind of solid everyday starts, go out there every fifth day and provide above average starting pitching. I think he's one of the guys that they have to think about. And then on the hitting side, gosh, maybe A.J. Pollock could be a little bit pricey if they're going to go after some of the other big guys. But he's getting a lot of interest. He wants something in the line of the Lorenzo Cain deal. So possibly there, and then maybe you look at the back of the bullpen and Craig Kimbrell or Adam Ottavino or somebody like that. I think those guys could be in play too.
I look at the lineup, and I think now there were some reports that they were interested in Paul Goldschmidt, and listen, you imagine a lineup with him, but the bottom line is this: they would have to find a taker for Carlos Santana, and then again, you're moving Hoskins out of left field. Obviously, you can't really put him. Well, I should say you can't put him back at first, so you're going to have him in the outfield. So, can you see them if they make a play for a player of his caliber? They have to figure out a way to move Carlos Santana, do they not?
Yeah, and I don't think they can afford to play Rhys Hoskins in the outfield next season. I think that to me, it makes absolutely no sense. Even as great as Goldschmidt is, I don't think they can bring in a first baseman because Hoskins has to play first base. And that's why Carlos Santana played some third base. Even if they move him, I still think Hoskins has got to be your first baseman, an everyday first baseman. So that, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But, yeah, I think you're spot on that if they really want to upgrade in a big way, then Carlos Santana's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, and that's the problem. He's got 2 years left with around $35 million on his contract. So, again, how do you accomplish both goals, right? You're getting the money off the books while you're also trying to find a decent dance partner here in that trade. I mean, I was just thinking it from, the lineup. I mean, that's from a lineup. I mean, think about that, right? Top or middle of that order, maybe Harper, Goldschmidt, and Rhys Hoskins.
That would be scary good if they could fit all those guys in there.
Do you look at a pitcher like Nola and Eflin right now? I don't want to say untouchable, but pitchers that they would not package in any type of deal.
I can't see any way they would trade Nola. Eflin, it's possible. His name has come up before in potential trade talks, but it seems to me that wouldn't be off the table completely the way that Nola would. So if they can find somebody willing to trade them a starting player, an impact bat, something like that, and can build a package that includes Eflin, I don't see why they wouldn't seriously consider that.
I can see them packaging Eflin with, say, a Pivetta, maybe a Velasquez, and maybe you throw in an outfielder. Listen, I think for a player like Goldschmidt, you're going to have to get back. I should say you're going to have to give. You're going to have to give up a lot. And look, the one thing too is their middle infield. Their defense was horrible.
Yeah. I
mean, and that's another thing. And as far as the pitching, I still think at the end of the day, I would like to see them go after another frontline starter. There's going to be a surplus of pitching out there. I think they definitely have to go out and maybe try to get another lefty. I mean, I like Corbin because of his age, and I think he's blossoming in one of the top lefties in the game, right? And you saw that the way he finished he finished 2018 with the Diamondbacks.
Yep, and I'll tell you one other thing too, Rich. You mentioned the infield defense. This is a really good year for teams to shop for second baseman, and especially if you're looking for a veteran guy who may only need to be there for a year or two. You've got the Kinslers, you've got Brian Dozier, you've got Jed Lowry, DJ LeMahieu. There are a lot of good second basemen. This could be one of those instances where the market is just so full of those types of guys that buyers have a little bit of an advantage in terms of who they want to pick and choose from, as opposed to some of the other, more hard-to-stock positions.
What did you think of the Yankees move for Paxton?
I thought it was fantastic, and it's something that the Yankees certainly needed. They needed a left-hander.
Would you have given up Sheffield?
I think so, just because, he's one of those guys that they acquired in the trade. So it's not like they followed him, they drafted him, and there's a lot of front offices fall in love with some of those guys that they've scouted and they feel like are their own. And in this case, he was part of a windfall of another trade, and so it may be a little bit easier to let him go. But he could be what James Paxton is. But the fact is, we know Paxton's already been in the major leagues and has had some success. The no-hitter last year and great strikeout rate, and he gives the Yankees a left-handed pitcher that they could plug into the rotation right now. So I think it's definitely a need for them, and they filled it. So good for them.
Two things, though. Listen, we know he's got that elite fastball. It's mid-upper 90s. But my issue is, can you stay healthy, right? Because he's made so many trips to the DL since 2014. If he's healthy, so be it, because I know he had a career high in both starts and innings last season, which is good. But then on the flip side of that, I'm thinking, then why are you bringing back CeCe? To me, that made no sense.
I'll tell you what, I think, as we've seen so often now in the last couple of years, you need to have depth. And for a one-year contract for CeCe, there's no downside for that. So, I mean, he can go out there. He can be a guy that, if Paxton should go on the DL, for instance, he's ready-made to fit into that rotation. He could be a fifth starter who could pitch, be skipped on a day with or a week with rainouts or off days or something like that. So he's an insurance policy. He's not very expensive in the grand scheme of things. And I think you never can have too much starting pitching. And it goes back to the point about Paxton and his injury history. It just gives them a little bit more of a cushion.
Yeah, and you're looking around. You were mentioning second basemen around the league and pitchers. How about catchers too? The one thing, and I failed to ask you this with the Phillies, I can give you two names: Saravelli, and what about Salvador Perez?
Yeah, in terms of a possible trade possibility?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Anytime you can get a guy who can give you stability behind the plate like he can, I think you got to consider it. And he's been an Iron Man back there. And plus, you can't overlook the offense, which sometimes it's hard to find.
Yeah, and listen, I know like even a player of Saravelli's caliber doesn't have Ramos's power, so to speak. But again, he's typically top three among catchers in on-base percentage year after year. And I also like Perez because I think that's a friendly contract too when you think about it. And you look at what's going on with Kansas City. There's so many teams. It is funny that they have success and then they realize, okay, we had success. We got to the playoffs. We won a World Series. We've kind of peaked, and now we got to basically start over again. And baseball is funny like that because I mentioned what Seattle's doing. They realize, hey, we're not going to catch those two teams. We're not going to. We don't have the firepower to maybe catch up Oakland or Houston. And then you saw the Royals a couple years removed from the World Series. I mean, I get the sense that teams are more willing once they get to that championship or they make that deep run. They decide, okay, we're good, and now we're going to tear it back down.
Yeah, I think it's a case where just the financial power that the big franchises have to be contenders, year in and year out. These other teams that don't have all of those resources and don't have the huge TV deals, you've got to make your push while you can. And, the Royals did that, and I think Seattle tried to do that, but fell short. And now it's like, we don't have the firepower anymore. We're going to have to tear it down. And I think teams are more willing now to tear down things when it looks like the odds are stacked against them.
All right, let me let you out of here on this. Josh and I were having this conversation. It was a good one yesterday. Who commands the most money? Is it going to be Harper or is it going to be Machado? And who do you believe is going to get the bigger contract?
I tell you, I think I've been thinking Harper for the longest time, and now I'm coming around to Machado just because of the number of teams that could be in on him and the preference for an infielder versus an outfielder.
Premium position, premium defensive position.
Yep, and Machado defensively provides you with somebody who's won a Gold Glove already and can be, if needed, shifted to third base, even though I think he definitely wants to play shortstop. But in terms of, I think Harper may be willing to take a shorter deal with more money average per year and possibly get back out into the free agent market again sooner rather than take that long extended deal of 10 years or more.
I was reading the report, and it was probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago where he turned down the offer, and I guess the Nationals offered him did not include a no-trade clause. Okay, listen, I would love clarity on this because I'm really curious. I mean, if this is a 10-year, $300 million contract, I don't know how you turn that down, but be that as it may, Do you have any inkling? Where do you believe these two players will land? And when it's all said and done?
I think the Phillies are going to get one of them, and it seems to me, I still have said, and you and I have talked before, I think Machado comes to Philadelphia, and I think Harper goes.
Really?
I do, and I think Harper. I thought the Cubs originally. Now I'm not so sure. I think it's possible he could go to the Dodgers. There's just so much rumor and misinformation.
I know, but
and everything that it's hard to read the tea leaves.
Yes.
But it just seems to me that Machado would make an excellent fit in Philadelphia, and if they have the money to do it, that's who they're going after rather than Harper. But it could be, I could get a different feeling in another week or two.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's any, there are any reservations by the Phillies brass before, if they were to put out an offer on the table and say it's in excess, say it's, I don't know, 10 years, 350, and Machado's, he's not going to, he's not going to say no to that one, right? If there's, I wouldn't. If there's any, just a little bit of reservation where, he did admit, sometimes he has a tendency to not hustle, and then he came back and he wanted to do a little damage control. This is Philly. I always think of Bobby Abreu, right? Because he made it look so easy, and people always thought it was lack of hustle, lack of passion. That's how he played the game. He was never really embraced. Machado starts to do that, and he doesn't leg out a ground ball, or he doesn't stretch a base hit into a double. I mean, that's listen, I know there's a big risk to reward there, but that would be in the back of my mind. Just a little bit floating there.
Understand that. But, Harper has had accusations of that too, and him not running balls out and hitting balls off the wall and not hustling to first base and all of that. Remember, he and Matt Williams got into a little thing, and he and Jonathan Papelbon. So I think that, yes, you do run that risk some degree with Machado, but with Bryce Harper, you do that as well.
Yeah,
so
that's
I think
a fair point.
Put them under the same umbrella, and I still think that any team, if they're saying that, his attitude concerns us a little bit, to me that seems like just a way to maybe drive the price down ever so slightly.
Right.
So he fits in
$50
your
million.
price range.
Yeah, take off 25 because you're not hustling.
Right.
All right, my friend. Always appreciate it. We will definitely talk next week. I have a feeling something within the next week or two. When the teams are kind of quiet and they pretend as if, well, we're just going to move forward and do what we need to do, that's when all of a sudden they just slip in and they make a move. You're right. I believe ultimately the Phillies are going to nab one of those players. I just don't know which one it's going to be.
Well, hopefully they'll do it by the next time we talk.
I hope so.
Do more than just speculate on
Exactly. Always appreciate it, Steve. We'll talk next week, pal.
Thanks, Rich.
All right, you got it. Steve Gardner from USA Today on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Good stuff.